me to share.
One day I'll get that on straight up, won't I? I should be right to go.
Okay, cool. All right, so this is the parking exercise that we set for you. And we've had a look through what you've submitted on Schoology, and you've all done an excellent job, particularly those who managed to actually find some parking signs rather than just sketching them. That was really good. So this is our suggested solution. And there are a few small things that I picked up from some of your attempts at this. The first thing is that these signs here, 1P, are all fine. I think virtually everyone got them right without any trouble. The question is, do you provide the no stopping sign on the last pole, marking the no stopping distance to the adjacent intersection? And the answer is you could or couldn't. Probably if you've got the pole there anyway, and you've got the permissive green parking sign there anyway, then probably you'd put the no stopping pointing towards the intersection as well at that end and at that end. And similarly across this little John Street as well. The bus zone sign should be a bus zone sign. I think someone had bus only, but the correct sign for that is bus zone. And on the southern side of the road, I think you all got the parking disabled only correct. The word only is in blue to match the disabled parking symbol. The no stopping council vehicles accepted. I think everyone got right, except someone had the word only on there. Now, that's a common, well, not common, but I've often seen this mistake, mixing up the words only and accepted. And you sort of got to read the sign by interpreting the symbol. The symbol is no stopping. No stopping council vehicles only doesn't actually make sense. Does that mean the no stopping only applies to council vehicles, or does it mean only council vehicles are permitted to stop? It's a bit ambiguous and certainly not quite clear. If it's no stopping, then it should be council vehicles accepted. If it's permissive parking, such as the disabled spaces, it's permissive parking, disabled stickers only. So permissive only and prohibitive accepted. That's the way it should go. Some of you got the arrows in the wrong direction. That's sort of why we put these upside down so that it looks like the arrows are in the correct direction as you look at it, or you can of course turn the paper around the other way. Someone had no stopping with a red background. Tracy, I hope you're from New South Wales because that's the New South Wales standard, but not the standard anywhere else. And someone had no parking here for the 2 minutes, which I think is probably an acceptable option. You could have permissive parking for 2 minutes, or you could have no parking, which means you are allowed to stop there for up to 2 minutes with a few other conditions in the road rules. So that's the feedback on that, and I think everyone did a pretty good job. Oh, the other thing, of course, is actually putting the pavement marking for the disabled bay. The signs are probably legally enough, but it is also good to sort of mark it with the disabled symbol on the road pavement, surrounded by a yellow line. Now, you also note that the yellow line for the disabled parking bay and also for the bus zone bay, it doesn't include a yellow line adjacent to the curb. If it did have a yellow line adjacent to the curb, that would actually mean no stopping for anybody, no exceptions. But of course, we want the bus to be able to stop up here and we want the disabled person to be able to stop here. So you'd you don't have a line in the gutter adjacent to the curb. Cool. Any other questions or anything arising from that, Kathy?
Yeah, we've got a comment. Yeah, Tracy is from New South Wales, so
Good.
she's bang on there. No parking means that you can only park for 2 minutes and be 3 metres from your car. So reverts back to the road rules in New South Wales as well.
Yes.
Yep.
And that's the same in all the other states, I believe.
Yep, good one. We've got a hand up, so I'm going to ask Jay. Did you have a question, Jay?
Yes. Hi, David.
Morning, Jay.
So I had a question with a couple of the signs. So with the bus zone and disabled parking, when I was like drawing the signs, what I did was rather than having the red background for the bus zone, I wrote the bus zone letters in red color and had a white background. And similarly for the disabled sign, I drew the symbol in blue color and had a white background. I didn't intend to do that. I just wasn't very artistic. So I was wondering if that would be like, is that still correct, or would that be considered as incorrect?
Well, because you were sketching them, I sort of took it that you knew what symbol had to go there and you're just indicating what symbol went there. But at the end of the day, when the sign manufacturer actually manufactures the signs, the bus zone has to be white lettering on a red background, and the disabled symbol must be a white symbol on a blue background. So presumably the sign manufacturer knows that and would interpret your sketch correctly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good, thanks, Jay. All right, let's move on to the next session, which is this. Hopefully we can all see the screen there.
Yep, you're good to go. Thanks,
Good.
David.
So what we're going to cover today is railway crossing signs, pedestrian and cyclist signs, and Viseth is going to come in and talk about direction signs. So railway crossings is fairly straightforward. The Australian Standard 1742 Part 7 provides all the guidance you need, and it's very prescriptive. It's pretty easy to follow. Trains require a long distance to come to a complete stop, so that's important to remember. And consistency of signing at level crossings is always important. So if it's a passive crossing, and by passive crossing we mean one that doesn't have flashing red lights, it's simply, the control is simply by the signs, and that's it. These are the standard signs that you provide. Railway crossing with the width markers actually at the crossing itself, and a give way sign with the railway crossing on a red background. The red background came into the standards, I don't know, 10 or so years ago. So that should be the one that's used these days. And if there's more than one track, you also include the number of tracks there. In advance of that, you have the warning signs, which also indicate the angle of intersection between the road and the track. If it's close to 90 degrees, use that one. If it's closer to 45 degrees, use that one to give the approaching driver a sense of where they need to be looking for the train. And it even has a subplate saying, look for trains. And in advance of that, you have the choo-choo train warning sign and the words Rail X on the pavement. So for really, really minor level crossings, you can leave out some of those things, and the standard tells you about that. But for the general open access road across a railway level crossing, passive control, these are the signs you should provide. If it's passive control with a stop sign, then the give way sign is replaced by a stop sign, and the advanced signs are replaced by a stop sign ahead warning sign. The angle of intersection of the track doesn't really matter so much, because you're only going to be looking for trains when you come to a dead stop at the holding line up here. Yep. Then if it's active control, in other words, it's got flashing alternating red lights, then this is the assembly that goes at the crossing itself, including the stop on red signal sign. There may also be boom barriers. Whether there are or not, it's still the same assembly that we have at the crossing. And if there are nearby traffic signals, the railway level crossing could be coordinated with the nearby traffic signals. Side road warning signs. So if you're quite often, particularly in Victoria, you have a major highway which is parallel to the railway line, and then side roads go off and there's a level crossing there. You often close to the intersection of the roads, the road intersection. So if that's the case, then this is a warning sign that can be used, or if it's a passive crossing, then the choo-choo train warning sign together with on-side road. And if it's an active crossing, then this is the appropriate warning sign, and again, on-side road. If possible, put those warning signs in the side road and not on the road parallel to the tracks, because the signs are really irrelevant to anyone travelling along the parallel road. It's only relevant to those people who are going to turn down the side road, which might actually be a very small proportion of the traffic. So if possible, fit all those signs into the side road, but if not possible, then you need to put them on the main road. Advance warnings assemblies with the flashing yellow lights are also sometimes used. They increase the warning of an active railway level crossing. Of course, you need to have all the detection system there to detect that the train's coming in order to flash the yellow lights on the top of the sign. Reserve these for places where there's a high collision risk. And the idea is that the flashing yellow lights come on before the flashing red lights come on at the crossing itself. Out of these two designs, I prefer the one on the left. The one on the right is a possibility, but usually the one on the left, the more vertical arrangement, is a better solution. Yellow box marking. This can be used where queuing across the railway level crossing is an issue, and it highlights the area where queuing is discouraged, and it doesn't legally define what is the actual level crossing, but it sort of does. And there's guidance in the Australian Standard about how far away from the nearest track you should put the yellow box marking. And as we said in one of the last sessions, the Keep Tracks Clear sign is not a regulatory sign because it doesn't invoke the road rule. It simply reinforces the road rule that's there already. And the road rule says, thou shalt not stop on a level crossing. So again, as with many of these things we've talked about, this is above and beyond the standard. So only use it where it's a fairly serious issue, so that we reserve these sorts of treatments for the worst cases around the state or around the country. Pedestrian facilities at railway level crossings. We always provide tactile pavement markers, ground surface indicators, to advise pedestrians, particularly those with a visual disability, where they should stop. And the fencing is arranged in a sort of maze to slow pedestrians down, and also to encourage the cyclists to dismount, which is also encouraged by the sign. Yep, and there are signs for the cyclists. The actually traffic signal arrangement is not that common, but is also a possibility if you actually want to put up a red man symbol. Okay, so that's all I wanted to cover on railway level crossings. There's probably a lot more to it, but it doesn't come up that often. The Australian Standard is fairly clear. So I wonder if there's any questions about level crossings.
No, David.
That's good. Let's move along. Bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So this is in the Australian Standard Part 9 for bicycle facilities and Part 10 for pedestrian control and protection. Part 9 covers on-road bicycle lanes and also off-road facilities, bicycle paths and shared paths and separated paths. It also covers that bicycles are not allowed on freeways and the appropriate signs and pavement markings. Oh, sorry, bicycles are allowed on rural freeways, but not urban freeways. And the pedestrian part of the Australian Standard covers the pedestrian zebra crossings, children's crossings, signalised crossings, physical treatments and the relevant signs. So we'll go through some of these things. On-road lanes for cyclists can be laid out like this. The signs indicate that it's a bicycle lane. The pavement markings also indicate it's a bicycle lane, and you can use one or the other. Got a few notes here about this. So legally speaking, it's the markings or the signs. So you can do one or the other, but good practice uses both. So unless it's a real Mickey Mouse case, I would suggest that for most roads and certainly arterial roads, you should use both the markings and the signs. And the lines indicating the bicycle path, as they cross over a side road, they become dotted lines, broken lines, in order to indicate to the drivers that they can still cross it. It's not misinterpreted as a stop line. Okay. So these are the appropriate signs. If there's a need to use a warning sign, then it's the yellow background warning sign with just the bicycle symbol on it. There is another sign that is watch for cyclists, which is not regulatory and is only really warning. Whether you would use the warning sign or this black and white version is not really clear. But a watch for cyclists seems to me to be just a bit more of a general warning, whereas the bicycle warning sign would be more used if there is actually a bicycle path crossing the road or something like that. Off-road facilities, which consist of shared paths, separated paths and exclusive paths. If it's a shared path, this is the appropriate sign. If it's a separated path, then this is the appropriate sign with the cycle symbol and the pedestrian symbol on the appropriate side of the sign to match which parts of the separated path for pedestrians and cyclists. And if it's an exclusive path there for bicycles only, then you put up the bicycles only sign. Cyclist crossing warning sign. So this is the bicycle warning sign, but with a double-ended arrow underneath it if there's a path actually crossing the road. And there are various signs that would actually be placed on the off-road path to warn cyclists of what might be happening, such as that there's a road ahead, or that they must give way, or indeed if they might have to stop, which is fairly unusual. And these should be pretty much the same as the signs that face the drivers, so the standard signs, except that they're usually smaller, and we generally call these AA size because they're smaller than the A size signs. Because cyclists are generally closer to the signs and they don't need them to be quite so large. And these are the appropriate markings as well on the pavement. So here's an example of how you might lay it out. You've got the appropriate pavement markings there, warning signs that there's an intersection of two shared paths. And as the cyclist and pedestrians, for that matter, are approaching a major road, you've got road ahead. And on the entrance to the path, you've got the regulatory sign, and on the exit from the path, you've got the regulatory sign with the word end underneath it. So, as I said before, the markings and the signs, you don't need to have both. From a legal point of view, it is a shared path if you have one or the other, but again, you have the option of putting in both. So the Australian Standard also says one or the other, so that gives you a bit more leeway to just have either the markings or the signs. And someone asked that question last week, so so hopefully that answers your question, which is this. It's the same answer whether you're talking about a shared path, a separated path, or a bicycle-only off-road path. So this is the separated path, and you need to have some markings to actually separate the bicycle path part of the path and the pedestrian part of the path, and clearly the signs need to be orientated the appropriate way to reinforce that. Cool.
David, sorry,
Yes.
just a quick question. Can you explain about the signs for raised zebra crossing and a green colour bicycle priority crossing, both together side by side?
Say that again, a raised
Zebra
zebra
crossing and a green colour bicycle priority crossing.
Okay, so the first thing about that is that a green colour bicycle crossing is just green colour. That has no regulatory significance whatsoever. We like to mark bicycle lanes and bicycle facilities with a green colour wherever we can, but putting down green pavement colouring is quite expensive. So generally we reserve the green colour for locations where the bicycles are in conflict with vehicle traffic. If it's a raised zebra crossing, and so actually that by coincidence, the next slide has a raised crossing, but it's not a zebra crossing. It's a raised bicycle crossing, and to indicate that that the drivers must give way to the cyclists, you have to put up give way signs. So it's not a zebra crossing, and you don't have the walking legs sign, you don't have the white stripes across the road, you simply have a give way sign which tells the drivers they must give way to whatever is intersecting, and what is intersecting in this case happens to be cyclists. And it doesn't say on this excerpt from the Australian Standard, but of course you can also colour the pavement green, which would probably be quite a good idea. And having a flat top road hump is not an essential part of that treatment, but it is highly recommended because it would be very easy for a driver just to give a quick glance, not see anybody coming, and zoom through the crossing. And of course, cyclists can travel reasonably quickly, so there is the potential still there for crashes to occur. The road hump is a very good method of trying to ensure that the drivers slow down. And that's also one of the reasons why this sort of sharp curve is in this example, also to try to encourage the cyclist to slow down. Even though the cyclists have got right of way, you don't want them travelling too fast through here because the drivers might not have a chance of seeing them approach. Yep. And that diagram, as with many of these diagrams, includes warning signs, and the same applies for all of these warning signs. only put them up if you really think it's necessary. And that would depend on sight distances, obstructions, the speed of the traffic, the speed of the cyclists, etc. Okay, so hopefully that answered the question about raised zebra and green markings. Bicycle wayfinding signs are becoming quite popular, and these can be provided for cyclists for wayfinding purposes so that the cyclists know where they're going. They're generally provided at junctions and decision-making points, and the signs can show destinations and also the distances to those destinations in kilometres, and include the bicycle symbol so that if they're on the road, it's clear that this sign is for the cyclists, not for the drivers, and they should be blue legend on a white background. I do think that some councils go overboard with providing those sorts of signs on the road system. I think wayfinding signs are very important on bicycle trails, that is off-road facilities, and particularly where it's not quite clear where the trail goes. The first and most important priority should be to sign the continuing trail, because sometimes trails don't just go in straight lines, they go all over the place, you know, alongside the river and then across the river and then across the river back again. So signposting the trail is the first priority. Signposting destinations that people might be cycling to would be the second priority. And signing them on the road system is the lowest priority, because if we're signing, for instance, in this example, to Swinburne University, well, people in cars want to go to Swinburne University as well, so why not just provide a sign that suits all road users, drivers, cyclists and pedestrians, rather than just signs for cyclists. So that's my little rant about wayfinding signs. Okay, so now a bit about pedestrian crossings. So this is part 10 of the Australian Standard. Pedestrians have priority at zebra crossings. They're marked by pedestrian crossing signs and the white stripes. And the road rules do say white stripes, so the stripes need to be white. If you want to put down yellow stripes, there's always the possibility that some smart lawyer will actually challenge that and say that's not a zebra crossing because it doesn't have white stripes. They should only be used where the approach speeds are 50 kilometres or below, and that might be set by the speed limit. But also, we do allow zebra crossings across left-turn slip lanes, even though the speed limit for the intersection might be 80 or even 90 kilometres an hour, but we assume that the left turners going through a slip lane are going to slow down to something lower than 50 kilometres an hour because they've got to give way. The Australian Standard also says there should be no more than one lane of moving traffic in either direction. So if you've got two lanes in one direction, you shouldn't really use a zebra crossing, and the reason for that is because you might have one vehicle stopped at the crossing and then the other vehicle tries to overtake or undertake the other vehicle and not actually properly look for the presence of a pedestrian. It's important to ensure adequate sight distance to the crossing, because the driver's got to give way to the pedestrian. You've got to give the driver a fair chance to actually see the pedestrian. So ensure that there's parking restrictions so that you don't have cars or even worse, vans or something like that parking too close to the crossing. It's becoming more common and good practice to put zebra crossings on raised platforms, and sometimes they're called wombat crossings. I don't know why, but they are. And the last point is also a very important point. Street lighting must be provided, because the drivers have to give way to pedestrians at all times of day or night. the drivers have to be able to see the pedestrians, and to be able to see the pedestrians, you really have to provide street lighting, and there is particular design of street lighting to highlight the crossing and ensure that the pedestrian is silhouetted in the view of the approaching driver. So putting up zebra crossings without street lighting is very bad practice. So this is the general layout of zebra crossings. Because this diagram has got the road in white, it's got the stripes in black, but clearly it's white stripes on a black asphalt. The walking leg signs are important. I think maybe legally it's still a zebra crossing without the walking leg sign, but you must always put them in. It's like good practice to always have the walking leg sign together with the zebra crossing. The advance warning signs, that's the appropriate sign. Again, only really needed if you need to provide appropriate warning. And parking restrictions should be invoked in some way, either by no stopping signs or by a yellow edge line. The R31 sign, that's the walking leg sign, may be supplemented with flashing yellow signals, and that is more common in Victoria than other states, and is still good practice if it's a road that carries a reasonable amount of traffic. Not really necessary across left turn slip lanes, but if speeds are 50 kilometres an hour and it's a fairly straight road, I would be recommending including the flashing yellow signals as well. You have to provide the street lighting, so you've got to do electrical work anyway, so it doesn't actually cost too much to put in the flashing yellow signals as well. Children's crossings. So these used to be called school crossings, but really it's children's crossings at any place where children might cross the road to a nearby school or to a nearby park, whatever it might be. This is the standard layout for children's crossings, and it consists of red and white posts at the side of the road, and attached to that post is the children's crossing flag on an orange background. And it is only a children's crossing when the flag is displayed. So if the flag is not displayed, it's not a children's crossing, which means it doesn't have legal effect. And there's no obligation for drivers to give way to pedestrians, even though many drivers are a bit confused and quite often they will give way to pedestrians. But legally speaking, it's only enforceable when the flags are displayed. Again, parking should be banned one way or another adjacent to the crossing, so that the drivers have a good chance of actually seeing the pedestrians. And the appropriate warning signs are the Jack and Jill warning sign together with the crossing ahead subplate. And often, of course, these are also they have children's crossing supervisors there, not everyone, but most of the ones near schools will also have the supervisor.
David, just a couple
Yes.
of questions here, please. Are pedestrian crossing signs, i.e. the walking legs for zebra crossings, regulatory?
Yes.
They are regulatory.
They are regulatory, and I think, I can't quite remember this exactly. I can't quite remember whether it is legally a pedestrian crossing if one of the walking leg signs is missing. I can't quite remember exactly. But anyway, the point is that good practice is you always put that sign up.
Okay. And if schools leave flags out all day, is it still enforceable outside the school zone hours?
Yes.
So as long as the flags are there, it's a children's crossing.
Yep, that's right. So the road rules don't say anything about school zones or school times. The road rules, as far as having to give way at a children's crossing, is simply if it is a children's crossing, because the flags are there, then the driver must give way.
What about if there's no supervisor?
Yep, same thing. And there are children's crossings without supervisors, so it doesn't have to have a supervisor. It's the obligation to give way is applied through the road rules if it is a children's crossing. And it's a children's crossing if it's got the red and white posts and the children's crossing flag.
Terrific, thank you.
Cool. All right. Pedestrian refuges. So these are a very good treatment. It provides no obligation for drivers to give way, but it does make things easier for pedestrians to cross the road. And if you provide an island in the middle of the road, it's a good idea to have a keep left sign, and no stopping should be put in if necessary, in order to make sure there's sufficient space there. And the warning sign is not essential, but if you require a warning sign, that is the appropriate warning sign to use, the pedestrians warning sign together with refuge island. I think pedestrian refuges are underused as a treatment because they're very simple, they're very easy. You don't need to provide extra street lighting. It makes the job of the pedestrian crossing the road much easier because they just cross one direction at a time, and certainly improve safety. Whereas a pedestrian crossing the road and stopping on a white line in the middle of the road is obviously not very secure. Okay, so again, these are some of the standard signs: the pedestrian warning sign, the children warning sign, which we just call Jack and Jill for short, pedestrians prohibited, and supplementary plates such as aged, disabled, blind, and then of course you've got the safety zone sign to indicate safety zones at tram stops. Okay, oh, that must be it for pedestrians and cyclists. So any other questions about those topics?
Not yet. Thanks for getting to those questions throughout. And if there are any other questions, please type them in as we go. Tracking well for time, David.
That's good. I wanted to give Viseth as much time as possible because direction signs is a very important topic. Now, Viseth, are you going to share your screen here?
Yeah, so what's the best way? I do have a...
All right, so I'll get out of it.
Presentation here. All right, let's see if I can share. Where is it? Bear with me here, so I'm trying to find the screen. Yep, there we go. So, yep, hopefully everyone can see the screen now.
Just flick over your display settings.
Yep.
That's okay. This is a common...
I think it's showing the wrong one.
Yeah, we can see your presenter view.
Right,
so if you
bear
just...
with me here, let me just change the... Zoom's always good fun.
It likes to mix things up a bit.
That's right. Let's see if that comes in now. Hopefully. Whoops, that's the wrong screen again. Always fun with technology.
We're on the right setting, so I think, yeah, there we go. Thanks, Viseth.
So, good morning, everyone, again. So, this part of the, I guess, the workshop here will be looking at direction signs and what direction signs mean for road users, how it all works, and I guess the correct way of using signs to ensure that the messages that you want to provide drivers are both clear and consistent. So the main purpose of direction signs is to assist navigation. So if you're traveling around the road network in Victoria, these signs do assist with wayfinding, telling you, all right, there's an intersection coming up, what happens if I go straight, what happens if I go left or right. It also provides a valuable tool to reassure drivers that they are going the right way, even if their GPS says otherwise. So they do give that, very strong reassurance that, yep, this is the path I need to take. As I said, they do highlight the upcoming intersections and interchanges. So sometimes the direction sign is a much better option than an intersection warning sign. And we always need to remember that the signs are both for local drivers and for non-local drivers. So there are indeed two important audiences that we need to cater for. And we can never assume that people know the road names or where that road takes them to. So let's just have a quick look at the history of signs. I always enjoy going through this particular slide. So starting off in the 40s and 50s, our direction sign started off being a quite a simple wooden design, if you can call it that. Black and white, everything was capitalized, like how it was back in the 40s and 50s. And then fast forward to the 1960s, the color scheme got inverted, and we had the introduction of paints that were reflective in nature. Again, in the 1970s, there was another change in the standards. We saw different text being shown in different letter cases. So a change of the destinations to be mixed case, while road names remained in uppercase. The 1980s saw another revolution. Not talking about the Soviet Union here, but the introduction of retroreflective sheeting materials. So what this meant was that signs could now be read at night due to the materials being able to reflect headlights. So yeah, before signs were not that great at night, but with this new material that was I guess installed in the 1980s, signs could now reflect headlights. In the 1990s, we saw the introduction of the alphanumeric route numbers in rural Victoria, and all the way today, where these are what the signs look like today with the Australian standards, border styles, and other elements as well. So for those who are interested, the two signs in blue are the signs at the same location in Montana. You can see in 40 years, things do change. And the other signs, again, in Horsham, the change between the designs at the same location there. So there are a few key principles of good design that when you need to look at when you're designing a particular sign. Excuse me. So it's important to ensure that the correct information is displayed and in the correct locations. One of the important things about direction sign is they also rely on what I like to call a subtlety in design. Whilst, if you driving past this sign at 100 kilometers an hour, you may not pick up on these subtleties, but there are certain design elements that have been incorporated to make reading a sign much easier. So this includes the use of correct colors. So if you see a green sign in the distance, it's a direction sign. It's going to tell me there's an intersection coming up and where those departures take me. You do need the correct sign sheeting material, as I touched on earlier. These signs are designed to be read in both daylight and nighttime conditions. So you do need the retroreflective sheeting material. The elements do need to be visually well proportioned. Signs do need to look good. The last thing you want someone doing about thinking about it saying, oh, that looked a bit weird, as opposed to, oh, it takes me to Heathcote. So going back to the subtlety things that I was discussing before. Yeah, so it's important to get the visual balance, the aesthetics correct. And like with most things in life, the less information shown, the better. So it's important not to put an essay on the sign, as the saying goes, and you'll shortly see what I mean by that. So here's an example here of a wonderful direction sign that's a real sign on Phillip Island. On first glance, you go, all right, it's got, it's Back Beach Road is coming up. There's a couple of tourist destinations left and right. And then you take a closer look and go, hold on, which way is it to Melbourne? Do I turn left or do I turn right? And these are the things I guess you'll need to look for when you're designing a sign is, can the driver understand it? And have I introduced some sort of confusion here? So I suppose the intention of this sign was to tell you that the left and right departures is Back Beach Road. But by putting the information all together and then providing arrows on both sides, it gets confusing. Also, not to mention it's the incorrect shade of green that's been used. So on that, there's actually two shades of green that are available from sign manufacturers. You've got the Australian standard green, and then you got this international green, which we see on signs and we see in other countries. So the green that you see there is not the correct one used in Australia. We use a much more darker greeny green on signs. Talking about essays on signs from before, here's some wonderful examples from up north in the land of the sun. So, you know, you're traveling at 80 k's an hour. The question is always, can you read these signs at speed? Can you read these mammoth signs? If you can see how large these signs are, and while traveling at speed, if this sign, you know, can you read it? One could conclude no, but you know, our friends up in Queensland must have superpowers to allow them to read something like this. So when it comes to letter sizes and sign sizes, so here in Victoria, we've standardized the sizes of signs that are available for use. So there are 5 main sizes, A size being the smallest and E size being the largest. So if you're ever designing signs or reviewing signs, you'll see these sign codes be used. So if you see an A size sign, it means that it correlates to principal legend height of 140 mils. And what do I mean by principal legend height? That refers to the largest legend on a sign. So on a green direction sign, your most prominent or largest legend is usually the destination or suburb locality, and that would have a capital letter height of 140. So that's what the principal legend height refers to. What you find in general is B size is the default size for arterial roads, and E size is the default size for freeways. So there are certainly other sizes available, and for some other types of direction signs, they do indeed have different letter and sign sizes, all of which is explained in AS 1742 Part 15, which is the main Australian standard for design of direction signs. And of course, we do have the Vic Road supplement to Part 15, and the supplement in this case is 2 or 3 times larger than the parent document, just to give you an idea of, I guess, some of the specialized guidance that we've had to provide for Victoria. Not because the standard is incorrect or anything, is the standard is in some respects a bit high level, and as the road network that we deal with gets more complicated, we got, you know, ramps off ramps off ramps. We do find that that guidance does need to be captured, because this is probably the more difficult side of traffic engineering design, and it's something that does take a little bit of a nuance when you're coming up with sign designs. The next important part of a direction sign are arrows. They tell you what direction the destination is and whether you should go straight, left, or right. What you find is there is a bit of logic to this. So through arrows are usually located at the top of the sign. When the through movement is on a bit of a curve, you use the curve through arrow as seen in that middle Horsham sign there. As you know, you're going, as the through movement's on a bit of a bend, that curve arrow indicates that particular movement. The right arrow is usually above the left arrow in most cases. Sometimes it's swapped if the left destination is more important, but usually the arrangement is, you know, in terms of top to bottom, is straight, right, then left. And the other thing that's important is there is a requirement that arrows in different panels are shown in a staggered format. So if you look at the top right sign there, you'll find that in the top panel, the through arrows on the left. In the middle panel, the arrows on the right hand side, and in the bottom panel, the left movement is on the left hand side, the left arrow. For example, in that sign, if the left movement was in the middle, what would happen is that the through arrow would then be on the other side of the top panel. So there's always the importance of having the separation of arrows just to make the information a bit easier to read. Again, this goes back to that subtlety and the science, you know, behind being able to see the information quickly and then quickly determine what direction it is in. And finally, on freeways, when you have exit movements, the arrow is at a 45-degree arrow, just angle, just to show that, you know, it's a movement that's not completely 90 degrees. We do have the sign matrix in the VicRoads supplement to AS7 42 part 15. This gives practitioners the overview of the signs that are required for various types of road intersections. In the example here is a rural example. I've highlighted, I guess, a bit here that shows a B route approaching an A route. And if you follow the arrow on the B route approach, it shows that first you need an AD, an advanced direction sign, followed by an intersection direction sign, ID, and then a reassurance direction sign. We'll get into these types of signs in a moment. And as we just touched on before, the 180 here refers to the principal letter height, which then corresponds to a sign size of B. So standard through destinations are another very important part of direction sign design. These are your major, usually major town, cities or suburbs that you're telling drivers where that road goes. It's usually, you know, a place that is of importance to drivers, whether it's a major population center or at the junction of major roads. You do want to pick destinations that have a, you know, reasonable level of recognizability to unfamiliar drivers. You don't really want to pick small hamlets that only 50 people in the state know about. And once a destination appears, it generally should be signed continuously on signs until you reach that particular destination. So it's never a good idea just to pick a town because, you know, oh, it's just over there, but then don't show it on any other signs, because that will cause driver confusion, because we have to cater our signs for non-local drivers as well. And the purpose of direction sign and the display of destination, we're not using this as an advertising or tourism tool for that particular town or destination. So it shouldn't just be used to merely, you know, promote a locality along the road. That's not the purpose of these signs. The amount of legend on signs, to touch on before, not to put an essay on the sign, there are certain guidelines, if you can call them that, about the amount of information that you can provide. We are looking at a maximum of 5 names on an advanced direction sign. So a name in this case usually refers to a destination or a road name. For any one direction or one departure, a maximum of 2 destinations should be shown. Road names are generally always shown in urban areas, and in rural areas, road names are shown where there's no destination or route number that can be provided. Route numbers should always be shown and should always be positioned adjacent to the departure that it applies to. So whether it's, you know, next to the arrow or destination or road name will depend on the sign design, but route numbers, you know, must always be included where applicable. On freeway signs, there's a few more restrictions, mainly due to that signs are being mounted overhead, and of course with the amount of loading a cantilever or gantry can take, that does limit to a degree how much information you can provide on the sign, because the larger the sign, the greater the loading the sign has on that structure. Generally, we look at a maximum of 1 road name, 2 route numbers and 2 destinations, followed by maybe potentially an additional 1 or 2 lines for a driving instruction, such as left lane. And of course, route numbers where applicable should be shown. The example in the photo there has an exit number, and exit numbers are commonly becoming common as a further tool for identifying exit ramps. Now, in the real world, this is where the fun begins when it comes to design of freeway signs. As I said earlier, as our freeway network gets further complicated with additional ramps or future proofing for freeway management systems, it does limit where we can put our signs and what information you can put them. But yeah, you've got to balance all of those requirements. So this is why it becomes a bit of an art, sign designs and sign placements. So there's really not one design that you can safely say, oh, I'll use that for every single freeway interchange. You'll have to, I guess, modify and adjust the strategy depending on what you have and what the freeway environment is. So there's a little bit of, you have to play around with the design a bit sometimes. So the first sign that drivers see, the first main type, is what we call advanced direction signs. What it does is generally in its name, it provides drivers advance warning of the intersection. It contains information about all the relevant departures that a driver can take once they reach the intersection. These signs generally have arrows to indicate through left and right movements, and it's very important to provide these signs enough, in advance of the intersection, enough to give drivers enough time to read the information and then react to make a decision about whether they're going to go through left or right or whatever through the intersection. So the Australian standards does provide you with minimum distances based on the speed environment. These are I guess a spectrum of the various signs that are available for practitioners to use as advanced direction signs. You've got a G1V1, which is a simple stack-based design for any type of crossroad. You've got another crossroad intersection sign, a G1V2, which is 3 panels. You've got the G1V5 series, 1 and 2, which the G5V51 is a diagrammatic design, the wide format as it's known as, and the G1V52 below it is the narrow format version. Another variation of the cross intersection design is the G1V4, which basically shows a left and right. There's a left and right departure where either the road name or route number is shared between those two departures. And then you've got the G1V3, which is a diagrammatic design. This is where you let your, all your inner artistic skills come through, and you can design a sign that paints a picture of what the intersection is like, and yeah, it's a bit more of a diagrammatic feel to it, if you like. The next main type are intersection direction signs. These are installed at the intersection, thus its name. Usually contains information for a single departure. Of course, the information does need to match the information shown on the previous advanced direction sign, and these designs usually involve a chevron at the end of the sign that's pointing down that particular departure. Again, a number of signs are available for use. You've got the G1V1s, the G2V3s, which are pointing down that particular direction. You've got the G1V4, which is bidirectional for left and right movement. So you generally would find this at the facing the terminating leg at a T intersection. And then you do have a few signs that have arrows on them. So the sorry, that should be a G2V2. So the G2V2 sign of the C123, that's used at the roundabout. And the G1V5 is basically if you've got barely any space of the nature strip and you really need a compact design, that's a design you can use that has the arrow on it. And the last type of sign that you generally find departing an intersection are reassurance direction signs. So these signs are installed after an intersection and As the name suggests, it reassures drivers of the road they're currently traveling on. They may show a series of destinations that the driver can expect, or it can just be a standalone route number sign. When you've got a series of destinations shown, when you have a bracket around that destination, it means that that destination isn't along the route that you're currently traveling on. You have to turn off at some point in the future in order to reach that particular destination. So every time you see brackets, that's what it means. Is that town or city isn't on the road and you have to turn up ahead to reach it. And when you are providing a reassurance direction sign with destinations shown, a maximum of 4 destinations can be shown, and again, that just ensures that drivers aren't overwhelmed with too much information to read. Standalone signs, as I've touched on just then, they can be installed after the intersection, or if they're used elsewhere, they can be installed along a road to give that reassurance of the route number of that road. And you find these are fairly cheap, but they do perform a valuable task of reassuring drivers, especially on long drives in rural areas, that they are indeed following that particular road and that route number. Now we come to the fun bit, freeways, where the provision of these signs costs a bit more money and are usually overhead. In rural areas, we generally find these signs much more spaced out. So for advanced signs, the first advanced signs you usually find at the 2 kilometre mark, followed by the 1 kilometre mark. In urban areas, as interchanges are more closely spaced, the first advanced sign is generally at the 1 kilometre mark, and the next sign's at the 500 metre mark from the exit, which usually has the message left lane. Of course, there is a sign at the exit itself, and the sign at the exit itself usually involves that 45-degree arrow to indicate the exit movement on the exit ramp. Signs in urban areas are overhead mounted due to the number of lanes and higher volume of commercial vehicles. So you want to ensure that sign can be read, and also sometimes signs do take advantage of gantries, like the one in my background there. And indeed, direction signs are then also required on the crossroad approaches to a freeway interchange to tell drivers that you're about to hit a freeway and here are your options. On freeways, we do have exclusive or trap lane exits, which then also may mean that it's a part of a 2-lane exit. In this scenario, the left lane is a trap lane, and if you don't get out of the left lane, you are forced to exit the freeway. Because of this, condition, there is a need to provide very clear signage to drivers to indicate to them, what's happening in that left lane, as well as what's happening in the adjacent lanes, especially for a 2-lane exit where the second left lane is a shared lane. So in these situations, I do always advise to provide a lane allocation sign, which is a sign in the bottom right there, which clearly indicates the destination of each and every lane. And it does provide clearest information to drivers. There is a text-based option on the left there, and that's, more for more simple situations where there's no other, interference with the left lane, and all drivers need to do is concentrate on the sign. So for more simpler or situations, a text-based sign can be used. But as we find our freeway network in Melbourne getting much more complicated, you do find that the lane allocation sign covering all lanes is the best option, as it provides a much more clearer design. For more complicated interchanges, sometimes you do need to show the various legs that come off the freeway, and these do provide that good pictorial representation of the interchange and all the available movements. They're a very good tool in simplifying complex information, and they do complement those lane allocation signs that we just saw. The main downside of these signs is they're massive. They don't look that big while you're traveling past them at 100 kilometers an hour. But once you start reviewing these signs and you see it's like 12 meters tall versus, and it's 4 or 5, 6 meters wide, they are massive signs, which then command the appropriate structural supports to hold up that sign, which then goes back to, the sign needs to be protected by the appropriate barrier system. So, which then means that you need quite a bit of space on the left side of the freeway. But then again, don't let that scare you. If you need one, then you need one to give that information about a complex interchange or complex movement. They are easy to read, and they do serve that purpose. So the examples that you have there are a town bypass at the bottom right there, and the two on the left are closely spaced exits. Exit numbering is another tool for navigation available for drivers, and they basically number exits in a sequential order. Here in Melbourne, exits are numbered, in that sequential order, not by kilometre or not by distance. In Queensland, for example, exits are numbered based on the distance from a starting point. So exit 104 means that that exit is 104 kilometres from the start of the freeway. Whilst that is certainly an option in Victoria, given that our freeway networks are a little bit more established, or the exits are kind of set in stone, we have decided to go with the sequential numbering of the exits. So exit 1 is the first exit, exit 2 is the second exit, and so forth. And exit numbers increase away from the city, or if you're on the ring road, the numbers increase in a clockwise direction away from the Westgate Freeway. And where there are two movements available, a cardinal direction is added to the exit number, W for west, N for north, etc. Toll roads, you probably have seen these signs for Eastlink and CityLink. So we've gone with a blue and yellow colour scheme. And it seems that our friends up north in Queensland have also adopted this particular colour scheme. Are these the best contrast signs? Yeah, that's debatable. I personally would have gone for what they did in, if we had to have a different colour, gone with what they did in Texas, which was a bit of a white on purple design. But the Australian standard version is basically just to put the toll panel on a green. But due to Victoria being Victoria, this is the design that we've chosen, and I suppose for all toll roads, this is the colour scheme that is used, and I guess is recognised by the general public. For minor roads, we have black and white signs. So these black and white signs are quite simple, not that large, and their role is to give simple information about the name of that particular minor road. Route numbering. Route numbering, I think, is probably the most important tool available we have for navigation. While us locals potentially don't use it that often, it is certainly a valuable tool for those drivers who are not familiar with the road network, or whose English is not their first language. In that scenario, most people from in the world will recognize, Arabic numerals, the 4, the 1, and the C, and they'll recognize A, B, and C. So whilst English may not be a mother tongue, you will recognize numbers and letters. So that's why route numbering, especially the alphanumeric route numbering system, is quite valuable as a tool to help wayfinding and navigation. They should always be shown on signs if the road has a route number, and they are indeed the primary designator for freeway. So you've probably heard like the M80 Ring Road or the M1 corridor. So they are starting to feed into the general public's the main.
Sorry, can I just butt in there? We've just got a hand up, so I'm just going to check with if you're happy to take a question now.
Yep, sure, that's all good.
Great. Thanks, Wasim. Did you have a question?
Yes. Yes. Hello.
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 Right. At minor intersections, I mean Vic Road, Manage, and Winstead roads, can we substitute G3 category signs with the G2 or G1?
The D2 or D1.
No. At minor intersection, you showed that we are supposed to install G3, V8, and
Yep.
5. Can we substitute those with G2 or G1 signs?
Short answer is no, unless I guess it's again with G3 signs, they're used when the municipal road has no destination. So if that municipal road or local road has a destination, then yes, you'll be using green direction signs, so G1, G2. However, if your minor road doesn't have a destination and all you're doing is showing the name of the road, then you'd be using G3 series signs. So yeah, so these G3 series signs are only used when that minor road doesn't have a destination and all you're showing is the name of the road. So if you have a destination or the local road has a route number, that's a very rare case, then yes, you're using a green G1 or G2 signs.
Because I have seen green color signs on just denoting road name signs, even on Vic Road, many roads.
Yeah, so 15, 20 years ago, all signs were essentially green. But as the standards has changed in Victoria about 10 or 15 years ago, we've adopted the Australian standard requirements for signing minor roads. So if you're signing a minor road today and it doesn't have a destination, then I would expect G3 signs to be used. But unfortunately, when it comes to direction signs, we do see mistakes being being made. But yeah, look, if you are signing a minor road, that yeah, it's just the road name. Indeed, the G3 sign should be used.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Sorry, Baseth, we've got another question.
Yep.
Can you use, just bearing in mind, we've got a New South Wales participant with us as well. Can you use route number and road number?
I know they do that a lot in New South Wales. So the general principle in Victoria is in urban areas, yes, that they should be used. In rural areas, the reliance is on the route number and the destination. So in rural areas, the road name is generally only shown, or can be shown rather, if the rural road doesn't have a route number. If it has a route number, the route number takes the place of the road name, generally speaking.
Great, thank you. And another question about colour blindness. Has that been considered in sign design, and has that been raised as a safety issue by road users with this
I remember doing some research. I can't remember. This is some time ago. Is the white on green isn't too bad in terms of contrast. Contrast and color blindness is certainly something that does need to be considered, not just for signs, but pretty much all traffic control devices. The colors that have been chosen for direction signs, whilst are not, the greatest contrast we know is white on black, but some of these colors do come close to reaching that level of contrast. I don't have the numbers with me, of course, but I have heard that when some of these studies were done, again, these were many years ago, that the contrast wasn't too bad with the colors that have been used, assuming the colors don't fade over time, of course.
Yeah, great, thank you.
All right, yep. So the main route numbering system we have in Victoria, as you can see on the screen here, is the statewide route numbering scheme. So these are your alphanumeric route numbers. They consist of M, A, B, and C letter prefixes, and usually can consist of 1 to 3 numbers. Each letter represents the network importance of the route and to some degree the driving condition. And the system was introduced in Victoria back in 95, 96. And now we're seeing these routes beginning to populate themselves within the Melbourne metropolitan area. So in the metropolitan area of Melbourne, we still have the remnant Blue Shield system, which is known as the Metropolitan Route Numbering System. At this point in time, the route numbering system itself is it's at its maximum. You won't be seeing any new routes in the future. Any new routes that we see in metropolitan Melbourne will be the alphanumeric routes. But with this particular system, it involves the Blue Shields and 1 or 2 digits. North-south routes are odd numbered and east-west routes are even numbered. And when you are indeed designing a sign with metropolitan route numbers, the sign should either leave space for the allowance of a future route alphanumeric route number, or have the alphanumeric route number on the sign face with the Blue Shield as an overlay that can be removed in the future. When you put everything all together, I know I have spoken the last 35 minutes. This is what you should really end up with. So this is a typical signing scheme at a typical rural intersection. Pick one that's nice and simple. Knowing the world, it's never nice and simple. So in this example, you have got your advanced direction signs, you've got your intersection direction signs, as well as some reassurance signs. So when you put it all together, this is what you kind of expect in a signing scheme. When you're doing sign replacements, as you know, signs do have a finite life. Technically, I believe their warranty is about 12 months, but some signs are older than me. Some signs have been installed before I was born and are still on the road network. So when you do sign replacements, you do need to check whatever you're replacing, the design that you're using does meet current standards. It's very important. Make sure that the intersection hasn't changed. If it has changed, you may have to adjust arrows or add new information because it's a new departure link. Yeah, so you got to ensure destinations and route numbers and even road names are up to date. Don't just replace like for like, and where possible, future-proof the design. If you know the destination is going to change because the road's going to be extended, make provisions for that. If you know the road might become an arterial road in the future and may get a route number, make a space for the route number provision. So it's important just not just to replace like for like, but to make sure that the replacement meets current standard, has all the correct information, is the correct size, is future-proof where possible. So yeah, it's very easy to do like for like, but I strongly advise just take an extra 5 minutes just to double check that it's correct. And I guess before we talk about the exercise, any further questions?
Thank you, Vaseth. Yeah, bit more complicated, the direction sign side of things. So I guess the difference between, and you touched on this earlier, where the State Road Authority looks after theirs versus, I guess, what local government looks after. So a number of our participants would be local government. So
that's right. Yeah. So if you're local government, you'll certainly find more of those black and white G3 signs used for your road network. But you know, for some councils that do have local roads that are of a higher prominence and they have a destination sign, then that's when you can use green signs. So there's a little bit of a difference there. It's a bit of information, but generally speaking, arterial roads green, council roads white.
Great, thank you. All right, well, keep your questions coming through. You'll run through the exercise now. We've got about 10 minutes to go, and then any other questions as we go along, please do keep them coming through. Thanks, Vaseth.
Yep. So this is probably the more difficult exercise in this entire course. So don't feel too bad if you don't get it all right. Direction sign, as touched on, it's one of the more difficult aspects of traffic engineering. It's a bit of a, you know, it's where art, psychology, and engineering come together, as David has always said to me. So it's all about putting yourself in the driver's shoes. If I'm approaching this intersection, what do I need to know? Well, the main things that you need to know is there's an intersection coming up. I can go straight left or right. it takes me to this town or city, it has this route number. So it's all about thinking, well, most of the people here, are drivers or have traveled. So just put yourself in the driver's shoes, and that's probably a good starting point when it comes to direction sign design. So this leads us to our little exercise here. So this particular exercise gives you a fictitious intersection between two rural roads. And this particular task, essentially you'll be designing the signs before the intersection, after the intersection, and at the intersection. So your advanced signs, your intersection signs, and reassurance signs. Do focus about the information that needs to be shown, not expecting a work of art. You don't need to get your green pencil and color in the background of the sign. So just focus on the information that needs to be shown, placement of arrows, placement of information. Do note that, as you've seen in the slides, direction signs do come in different shapes and sizes. So, the route number can be located in different positions in the panel. Also, a bit of a hint. I'll jump to the exercise itself just to make it a little bit easier. As you're heading on the C234 towards Mansfield, there is no reassurance sign. And when you don't have a reassurance sign, what happens is the two intersection direction signs for that departure, so ID1 and ID2, what you do is you basically add the destination and then add the distance to that destination. So on ID2, for example, you'll have an intersection direction sign, you'll have a left chevron, it'll say Mansfield, and then the distance to Mansfield all on that sign. So it'll say C234 Mansfield 65. So that's a little bit of a hint for that intersection direction sign for the Mansfield direction. So yeah, here's your fictitious scenario here. You've got two roads here. One, the north departure takes you up to Swansea on the B12, while the south departure towards Kew has two route numbers. And then of course you've got the west departure towards Mansfield, which is the C234. So use the slides, use the supporting material that you have with you, and come up with the sign designs or the signs that have been labeled AD, ID, or RD.
Viseth, do you want to explain the difference between the black dots, the black arrowheads, and the open arrowheads?
That's right. So how this works is when you see a black dot with a black arrow, that indicates what we call as a standard through destination. That's a destination that needs to always appear on signs until you reach that particular town or city. When you have a black dot and a black triangle, and also a black dot and an open triangle, it means for that direction, there are actually two standard through destinations that need to be signed. So if you're, again, here's another clue. If you're departing the intersection here, and you see on this little plan here, actually got two triangles, filled in one and an open one, it means that there are indeed two destinations that need to be signed for that departure. And obviously, once you pass the first town, then you only need to sign the final one. But if you're before both towns, you do need to sign both. So that's what the two triangles represent. If you're on an approach and you have a blue arrow here, and the blue arrow has a blue circle, this is the override. This is the forget everything you saw south of the intersection and only sign the instruction that's given to you. So every time you see this arrow, it indicates on the approach that you're on for that departure that is indicated by the arrow. So in this case, for the south departure, coming from Mansfield, you only sign Mount Don and not sign Kew. So this is your override instruction. There are further arrows, but just to keep things easy for everyone, I thought I'd just include a couple of these special destination requirements. And that's what the arrows represent here. Again, it's in your supporting material if you need a further explanation. I think there is a worked example in there. But the key thing is just to pay attention to arrows and arrowheads, both at the intersection and away from the intersection on the various departures. Also do note that certain directions have 2 route numbers, so make sure you sign both. And for reassurance direction signs, so how these work, as we touched on earlier, reassurance direction signs, you sign the towns and cities and destinations that are along the road, and generally it's the destinations that you see in the plan. Yep.
All right.
Yep, that should help out.
Okay. Could you just cover off what the blue one means again? And I assume the question is about the arrow, the Mount Don arrow. If you can just confirm that one, Naomi.
That's a bit of an explanation. So if you're coming from Mansfield and you're about to turn right, this arrow indicates that for the right departure, you only sign Mount Don and you ignore everything else. So this arrow means you ignore the black triangle for Q. It's an override. So if this was telling, yeah, does that make sense, or are people still a little bit confused? So basically it's telling you that's the destination you have to sign for that right turn, ignore everything else that may be shown.
Okay, so let's just cover off where you'd be doing that is the AD3 sign. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the AD3 sign, you need to sign that it's a right turn and it's Mount Don.
Yeah.
As well as something else on that sign.
Yeah, so on the AD3, you'll show the route numbers.
Yeah.
C234, and the destination that is required to be signed is Mount Don and not Q.
Yeah.
So as I said before, a black triangle indicates the standard through destination for that departure. In this particular scenario here, the standard through destination which is required isn't the one because there's an overriding instruction given to you, and this overriding instruction is instead of Q being signed, it's actually Mount Don that is required to be signed for that right turn movement.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not common, but occasionally you find that certain approaches require different destinations to be signed due to local conditions.
All right. Do we have any other questions at this stage? If you just type them in or raise your hand.
Naomi's asked a question about bike route signs, bicycle direction signs. Should they be blue, blue on white, or white on blue? The slide I showed with the Swinburne University is the standard design for Victoria. It might be slightly different in other states, and it's just slightly different from what's in the Australian standard, but that is what should be used. And I recognise that a lot of councils have put up a lot of bicycle direction signs in all sorts of different colour schemes. In fact, even in the city of Boroondara, there are ones on a brown background, ones on a red background, and I think there might be some other colour as well, which is just crazy. Consistency in sign colours is important, and it shouldn't be different just because you cross over a municipal border. So our very strong recommendation for the state road authorities and all councils is that all bicycle direction signs should be the blue and white colour scheme.
I guess another thing just to extend off that, David, when it comes to pedestrian wayfinding signs, I do recommend the Wayfound document. You might want to touch more about that, David. Yes,
so the Wayfound document has just been published, and if you Google Wayfound as one word, at least I think it's one word, you should be able to find the website for it. That has been at least 10 years in the development and provides some very good advice on how to provide pedestrian wayfinding signage.
I'll pop a link into Schoology for everyone, David, in case the way found is hard to find on the net. Now, with the exercise, as Vaseth explained, now this is a learning opportunity, so you know don't stress about getting it 100% correct or anything like that. We have put a little start for you, so hopefully there's in Schoology there's a little hint, and Vaseth's already given us some hints as well. So hopefully that puts you on the right track. And if you've got any questions or anything like that, please send me an email, give me a call in the next day or so. And we'll thank you very much, Vaseth. Thank you, David, for your presentations today. And thanks everyone for your questions. And we'll catch you all again for the last session on Friday morning.
All right. See you, everyone.
Thanks again.
Cheers.
Bye.